morning, everybody. Thanks for coming to my talk. I think we have a great competition here. My name is Michael, and I'm going to talk about custom Spring Boot starters and about the magic behind auto-configuration of code and the fact that there's probably not much magic involved, but only looks like magic. I've been doing a little bit about myself. I'm doing Java for about 14 years now at a small company in Aachen, Germany, mainly in the utilities sector. We're creating desktop applications with Swing. I'm still doing Swing development, and our web products are created with Spring Web, obviously. I run a mainly English-speaking Java user group near the Dutch and Belgian borders in my place. I also have a blog, and you'll find me on Twitter. The keynote speakers actually gave me a hard time because I wanted to recap some of Spring Boot's goals, and I think I can skip the question if any one of you has used Spring in the past. I could probably ask who of you has used Spring with XML configuration, and that's a lot of you. And I think many of you may have struggled with getting things up and running, and then there came annotation-based configuration and Java configuration since early 2008 or so, Spring 3. Spring Boot wants to provide a faster getting started experience for all kind of Spring development and for all kind of Spring developers, either being new Spring developers or doing this for quite some time. Also, Spring Boot wants to be opinionated out of the box on sensible defaults. Next great example for this is the Spring Security Starter. If you add this to your application, then you get a default user, but this default user doesn't have a hard-coded password. Instead of, it gets a generated password each time the application restarts, and I think it's a pretty good thing because people tend to keep the generated password around, and suddenly there are a lot of Spring-based applications who all have the same password. At the same time, these defaults go out of your way pretty quickly if your requirements starts to change or to grow. If you provide a custom user repository, then the default user goes away, or you can just configure a password, and then the generated password goes out of your way. Next point is, we already heard this morning, a lot of non-functional features. For example, we saw the metrics page, we saw the health page in the keynote, the endpoints, and all of this should be externally be configurable. That means configuration properties can come from files inside your application, from the environment, or from external servers and the like. So next question would be, anyone has ever used Spring Boot, I think so. And each of you who has used Spring Boot probably has used a starter as well, because Spring Boot is not one big artifact. It's just a few core modules, and as it has been said earlier, there's a starter for nearly everything you can imagine. This way, Spring Boot is built. There are all kinds of starters to get your application up and running. There are starters for configuring the Web MVC framework, which brings in the embedded Tomcat. There are starters for caches, for databases and the like. For template engines, we're going to speak about that later, like FreeMarker or Thymeleaf. For validation, for social, if you need Twitter or Facebook login in your application. And there's a huge list, a lot of useful stuff in there. I'm using really many of them. But I think the following page, which is a screenshot of start.spring.io, shows the ecosystem much better. Each of the checkpoints, you can't see this on the screenshot. This is what the site looks. Does everybody of you know this site? You can get a full-blown Spring project from there as a zip file. This is what the site looks like if you switch it to full mode. And each and every one of those checkboxes is actually a starter, which is included with your application. So when you get this application from the site, it looks like magic because suddenly there is security in your application. You may have an embedded database, you have caching enabled and the like. How does this work? The anatomy of a starter. A starter mainly consists of two modules. The one for me, most important module is the autoconfigure module, and it contains the file spring.factories in the meta-inf directory, which is the basis for a kind of service locator, much like the built-in Java service locator, but tailored to Spring-specific needs. This is a key value file that contains some type of factories and implementing classes. And this is the thing that enables a starter to actually work without the user having to configure class path scanning for the package of a starter, or even worse, full class path scanning. And the autoconfigure module also contains your code, which is basically annotation and Java-based Spring configuration. You can do all kinds of stuff in it. And if you need, optional third-party dependencies. Optional because you don't want to force your user to include dependencies he might have in his applications. This is where the second part of a starter comes in, the starter module itself. The starter module usually depends on the auto-configuration module and on third-party dependencies. If you don't need this complexity, you just can put everything into one module. But you are free to leave your dependencies optional in your build file, because there are mechanisms for it to check if the dependencies are actually met on the class path. So the next thing that may look like magic is auto-configuration itself. As we heard from you, you have done a lot of XML configuration. Then there was annotation-based configuration in Springland. This is where you put all these at repositories, at services, at controllers on your classes, and Spring somehow managed to boot this up. And then there's a third way, which is called Java configuration, I think. You annotate classes with that configuration and instantiate your beans through plain Java code. And this is where a new thing came in, with Spring 4.0, which is add conditional and a lot of other annotations. As we heard, you can't have too much annotations. Interesting fact here is that the add conditional annotation above there in bold is core Spring framework. It is nothing to do with Spring Boot. Together with that conditional comes an interface condition, and you can implement all kinds of checks in with it. Either being it if there are classes on a class path, if properties are met, if connections are set, whatever you can imagine. With Spring Boot comes the huge list of other annotations. I forget the at in front of the annotation, sorry about that. We're not going to speak about all of those annotations. I'm just concentrate on the first 3 or 5 if you count the negative versions of it. The first one is the annotation which you can check, use to check for classes on your class path. Then we have an annotation that can be used to check if there's already a bean of a given type or in a given name in your application context. And the third one is a very powerful annotation, actually. It can be used to check if properties have certain values, if properties are set at all, or don't exist in your application context. So, about my demo. I'm going to speak about Thymeleaf, banner Spring Boot starter. Everybody knows what Thymeleaf is. Just a short recap, Thymeleaf is an advanced template language for generating server-side HTML, much like FreeMarker, but not like GSPs. GSP are compiled to Java classes, which isn't the case here. You can write your server-side template in plain HTML, which can be given to designers without breaking your code inside this file. And if you want to know more about this, Daniel will be speaking after my talk about great new features in Thymeleaf 3.0. But you all have heard of the banners in Spring, since the keynote, I think. And I want to create a starter that turns this new HTML tag into this HTML code and display it on web page. Just a funny example. And okay, I'm going to use this. So I hope my demo works now. And let's see what we can do right here. I'm probably the only one here using NetBeans, but I really like the product, and so we're going to work with NetBeans now. Hope you all can read this stuff. My demo consists of 2 projects, the starter itself, right there, and the demo that has been made use of the starter. So just a quick look at the POM file for my demo. I think this is readable. I bring in the first starter here. I'm inheriting from the Spring Boot starter parent, as it's the recommended way to get all the dependency management you need in a Spring application. By the way, I'm using the 1.3.3 release. Have an outlook for 1.4 later. I'm using just 2 starters here, Spring Boot Starter Web. I'm showing you a web application, and Spring Boot Starter Thymeleaf. This enables the integration of the template engine with Spring Boot. The dev tools, so that I don't have to restart the application all the time and to get a live reload server. And last but not least, my custom, or our custom starter we're going to write right now. This is all for the POM file. This is the application we're working with. Nothing fancy here, it's just a simple class, 1 controller. I wanted to show you this at Spring Boot application, but Stefan already did this for me. I'm gonna recap this anyway. At Spring Boot application does a lot of stuff. It is a configuration class itself, and add enable auto configuration is the annotation that enables the use of Spring.factories in the light of starter and getting those starters up and running. If you forget this annotation, you won't have any starters in your applications. And what always happens to me is that I forget the Spring.factories file when creating a starters, and I keep wondering why this does nothing. And last but not least, at Spring Boot application enables add component scan inside the package of which the application resides. And by the way, this is the reason why you shouldn't put your main application with this annotation in a default package. It would be a really bad idea because it scans the whole class path. So that being said, the website we are working is, this is a fully valid Thymeleaf site here, nothing fancy. Here in line 25, you see just a static image resource. This is the image we're going to replace with the custom tag I'm just about to write. I just run this application now and show you what the page looks like before we create the starter. I'm using Safari for this. Yeah, I think this is the motto of Spring.io, banner all the things. And is this readable from down there? There are some useful links down there. The pull request, which generates the banner ASCII art from image files, actually a Spring Boot app to generate ASCII art for you, and some other tools I used. Okay, just gonna change this now. Show. And reload the site, and the image is gone. Nothing to be seen here yet because we haven't anything implemented actually. So coming to the POM file of the starter, I'm only using the dependency management from Spring Boot here so that I don't have to type all the versions. And I'm only including 1 dependency, and this is Spring Boot autoconfigure, which contains all the annotations you did see on my slide. As promised, only optional dependencies on Thymeleaf. This is because I don't want them there, and I will show you that this starter doesn't break your application if the dependencies aren't met. So, as I said, this talk is not about Thymeleaf. I'm just going to show you very, very quickly how to extend Thymeleaf. Thymeleaf is extendable. You can create custom so-called dialects that dialects are made of processors that take HTML input and do stuff with them, and basically in this case returns a list of other HTML nodes, which is rendered as an HTML code for the banners. And those dialects have a prefix, in this case banner, and the processors work on elements, which is shown in this case. One thing I need for my demo is the banner supplier. This is an interface I have written. This is not Thymeleaf specific. It should get some arguments and returns a list of HTML nodes. That's pretty much all there is. Don't mind if you get this code yet. There's a GitHub repository already with the full demo with all tags I use and also including my slides and stuff. So finally, coming to the auto configuration mechanism. Here we are. This is the first file we see, spring.factories. In line 1, you see the factories for which are concrete implementations in the starter. There is only one, the Thymeleaf banner auto configuration, and this is the class we're going to work with right now. Wait a minute. Nothing fancy here so far. It's just a simple Java-based add configuration for Spring. Any one of you who hasn't seen this yet? Okay, stuff. Okay. This is a modern way of configuring your Spring application. I really like it because I can use my IDE to check where beans are instantiated, and I don't have to wait through XML code, and I don't have random beans popping up because I annotated them with stuff. I really like this. So we must make sure that our starter is nice like all the other starters and won't break our applications if we just drop into your dependency. And add the first conditional here. Oops, this is not what I want. Spring template engine comes from Thymeleaf, and it's the integration of Thymeleaf into Spring. So at this point, the auto configuration runs only when my dependencies are on the class path. The whole class is not evaluated if this Spring template engine isn't on the class. The auto configuration would stop there if the dependencies aren't there yet. So in the demo, you saw I'm using the Thymeleaf starter itself. It does a lot of configuration, and it includes all custom dialects which are available as beans in the Thymeleaf configuration. I don't have to do this myself if I write a custom dialect. But to make sure if anyone uses my starter, I want to make sure that my dialect is on the Thymeleaf configuration. There's an annotation for that. You can use autoconfigure after or before. That means I want to run this auto configuration before another auto configuration runs. And this auto configuration is actually called Thymeleaf. Oh, no, this is wrong. This is my auto configuration. I made this error twice. Thymeleaf auto configuration. This is the auto configuration class from the Spring Boot starter. So what we've seen here is this auto configuration runs just before another auto configuration to make sure the other auto configuration has the beans I'm going to instantiate a little later inside. Yeah?
What happens if this auto configuration is not on the class path?
This is a good question. I probably should have checked this, but I don't know what happens if this auto configuration isn't at all on the class path. Really don't know. I have to check this. Good question. I'm going to add this to the demo. Thank you. Yeah, doing actual configuration right here. Speaking about extending Thymeleaf, I'm returning my custom dialect here, which needs a banner supplier. We can use the dependency injection framework to get one instance of it and annotate this method with that bean. If I save this, you see a huge stack trace. It's an old stack trace. because there is no banner supplier yet in my application context, no such bean definition. We have to add one, and I don't want to write all this code, so I check this out. This is just another bean. This is an implementation of the banner supplier. It needs the environment and the resource loader until Spring 1.4. At the moment, banner isn't available as a bean, but it's going to change to in 1.4. So right now, all our dependencies are met. We have the dialect, we have add the line break back. This is probably better readable. Yeah, I'm going to save this and wait for the application to reload, and there we go. The first data we have written today. You can make this even better by, sorry for this, by adding the txt file that was there in the keynote. I have it prepared already. Oops, this is not what I wanted. Great, cool. This is bad. I think I might stop and recompile it right now, sorry. One moment, please. I want a cat on my website. So there it is. No, come on, there it is. So, where's my presentation gone? No, great. This keeps getting better and better. So, short recap, what we've seen so far. We have seen how Add Spring Boot application enables the component scanning and auto-configuration of your custom starters. And it does this through the Spring.Factory service locator. We have seen how to use add conditional on class with the mention that I probably forget to check one class on a class path. We have seen how you can use auto-configure before or after, both are possible and at the same time possible. And we have the short recap on how to instantiate beans through Java configuration. So next point. I want to behave our custom starter nicely. I'm just opening the application properties for the demo application, and I'm going to add Spring main banner mode here. You really shouldn't use this option, and turn it off. As you see in the log file down there, no more banner. But when I switch to the website, the cat keeps staying there. This is probably not what we want, what the user wants. So we are going to evaluate these properties on React accordingly. I'm going to add another bean right now. Call it the empty banner supplier. No, I don't need any parameters here, which basically returns an empty list of nodes. At this point, the application restarts without any errors. This is pretty interesting. I find it pretty interesting because I have two beans of the same type in my application context, but with different names. The names are taken from the method names, so I have two beans, banner supplier called empty banner supplier and banner supplier. And I'm running this with debug parameters, so Spring Framework can evaluate the name of the parameter and always uses this banner supplier. So all the stuff we're doing here doesn't help. The ASCII art stays right there. So one fix is to rename banner supplier into default banner supplier. If you have a look at the output, I have a nice stack trace with no unique bean definition, because now Spring cannot decide which bean to use. Okay. So the first other annotation we're going to add here is conditional on, where is it? Conditional, it's called conditional on missing bean. This way, the default banner supplier serves as a default, which it actually is. This method is only run if there is no other bean of this type on the class path right now. I'm the kind of guy who makes sure that this actually runs last, so I'm gonna order this like this. If I have several methods this way, I can make sure there is an order. So right now, if you come, we're going back, the banner is gone. It's pretty nice. The user then decides that he wants a banner in his applications and removes the property. The application restarts. You see the ASCII art. I don't know where NetBeans kills the colors in the terminal, but in the website it is still missing. This is because we are not being nice in our starter, and we forgot the next condition. This one is called conditional on property. You can check all kind of stuff with it. You can check if there's a property, if it has a certain value, and yeah, I'm not going to type in the property myself. I'm just going to copy and paste it. Let me just make it bigger. And we're going to check if it has the value of. So, and I'm going to order this too. By the way, the lower the value, the higher the priority it is. If you don't notice, it maybe looks weird. So we now have an empty banner supplier which only gets instantiated if a certain property is on is set in your application. Remember, this can be all kinds of properties. It can be from the environment, from starter parameters, whatever you name. Going back, the cat came back. So this time I don't manage to switch back to my slide. Again, short recap here. We have seen the add conditional on property annotation to check if properties have values and which values. We have seen the add conditional on missing bean property. You can use conditional on bean property if you depend on another bean in your application context, and another collaborator like a cache, for example. And we've seen how to order that stuff. So, next demo. There is a lot of magic going on, but not really. Spring is not as the magician we saw, some of you did see that yesterday evening. We keep nothing up its sleeve, and you can start your Spring application with --debug to get an auto configuration report, which contains a list of classes that have been a positive or negative match for auto configuration, and why they have been positive or negative matches. I prefer the actuator module, and I'm just going to add it as a dependency in the demo application right now. Oops, wrong group. Sorry. Boot. And the artifact is called Spring Boot Actuator. This is the point where I recompile the application, restart the application. It didn't work for me. Just a short moment, please. There we go. Spring Boot actuator does a lot of this non-functional feature stuff. I talked earlier about it. It's the health metrics, the environment stuff. Some of those endpoints are secured, and I think if I would have added Spring Security, this endpoint would be secured as well. This is the autoconfig endpoint I'm going to show you. Oops. And what you see here, I didn't find the plugin which turned the JSON stuff you see there into readable stuff. It's actually an object with negative and positive matches containing all the arrays. And to make this more readable, I've added some JavaScript code, which is inside the demo, that filters for the classes we have written so far. So you see at the top, the Thymeleaf banner auto configuration has been read because the classes I need on the class path are actually there. This is here, on class condition, class is found. This thing is active, is a positive match. I changed the configuration, so the on property condition matched for the empty banner supplier, so this is active. And the default banner supplier isn't active anymore because there is the empty banner supplier on the class path. So how do I switch to the demo without breaking my stuff? Just had to, in case you don't know this, you can run this with debug parameter or do the same stuff I did before. So the last example I'm going to show you today, and I'm afraid I'm going to finish early, is about creating custom condition. I've prepared a little banner that does more. It fetches stuff from Twitter, and it does a lot of HTML parsing, and the same reason we saw in the keynote is I don't want to do this every time the application runs. So I'm going to add one more starter to the demo, which is Spring Framework, boot, Spring Boot. Oops. Starter cache to have this nice annotation here. Enable caching. I'm not going to use any fancy stuff like caffeine. I'm just going to use the default implementation, which is a hash map, I think. And I'm also configuring another property here. I need a cache name to put my stuff into it because I'm not going to using the annotations. I'm going to use the cache directly. And I've added this banner supplier here, which needs the cache and does something, parsing HTML, getting stuff from Twitter. This was actually a quote from Josh Long. And what I want to do is, if I have a cache manager on my class path, in my application context, sorry, if I have a cache manager being in my application context, and I have a cache name configured, I want to have a special banner there, and it looks like this. I don't know if I have internet. It should get stuff from Twitter, but it doesn't. This is a quote. Stay bannered, my friends. This is actually the use case for what I want to show right now. There it comes. Nice. Slow connection here. I only want to neck you with this quote from Josh if you have turned your banner off. So, gonna check my application properties. Okay, it is turned off. I'm gonna turn it back on again. And let's see if the quote stays there. It does. This is not nice. So, oops, sorry. I think you immediately spot what's missing there. I'm not checking for the Spring main banner mode property and the instantiation of this bean. If I try this very naive way I add this property a second time, I noticed that this isn't a repeatable property. Sorry, I'm speaking about annotation. This is not a repeatable annotation. I think this is gonna change, but I'm not quite sure yet. So at the moment, I don't have a way to check for different properties having different values. I could check if both properties are set, but this is not what I want. Instead of, I'm going to show you as a last example how to create really complex condition by implementing the condition interface I spoke earlier myself. We add a static class here on special banner and ready or whatever you call it. I could implement condition to do this all stuff for myself, but I'm going to spare you this. I'm extends all nested conditions. All nested conditions is a helper class inside Spring Boot that checks for nested classes in itself and checks if all those conditions are met. There's a companion which is called any nested condition or none condition or whatever. It's read. Oops, sorry, because I have to add a constructor here. Conditions can be evaluated in two phases. The one phase when auto configuration is passed or when beans are registered. We want to use this annotation in the phase where the beans are registered. So this is what I have to add. All other stuff are just nested classes, like on cache manager present. I'm gonna just move my annotation there. I have to check if the cache name is configured on cache name configured, whatever. And last but not least, on banner turned off. I'm always making the same mistake. So I'll put this here. And then I use the most basic conditional annotation there is, which is this one, on special banner and ready. So just gonna make sure I've turned off the banner, turned on the banner. I'm gonna save this. Just takes a few seconds to reload. And there we go with our cat. Nice thing here to see is the auto configuration report really does include all the information. Let's make this a little bit bigger. This is too big. You see a really complex listing of class starting here. This was a match because the cache name was configured. This is a match because the cache manager bean is on the application context. And the last nested class wasn't a match because I've turned on the banner. So no magic at all at this point. So I have to switch 2 times. To recap this, you can implement org Spring Framework context annotation condition yourself. Then you can do everything you want in your condition. But you can also extend Spring Boot condition. There you have logging at your hands and more of the environment, or make use of one of those conditions. So what you have so far are 2 tricks, Spring.factories. So your user doesn't have to enable class path scanning of your starter, and you have got all those annotations at hand. Before I come to my conclusion, I have some time left. I'm going to show you new features of Spring 1.4. Oops. I'm just going to check out master. In master, in Spring 1.4, I have direct access to the banner itself, and with this change right now, I have added a banner.jpg. It suddenly got a lot louder, and this is not going to restart. I've changed to the release version. One moment, please. Last startup for today for my demo. Not working in the terminal, but it's okay. Now come on. Yeah, this is too big. So this was my demo for Spring I/O. I've added some further reading. The pull request is merged for generating ASCII art banners, but this is not the important thing I wanted to talk about today. So the important thing I wanted to talk about today is this data mechanism is really, really powerful. In my company, we're using this for creating custom repositories that we share amongst projects. And in the past, in plain Spring frameworks, I had to configure component scanning for the package where the repositories live or the entities, which I don't have to do anymore. We have a possibility to provide features in a most resilient way. I don't break an application by putting my starter into it if I don't have the requirements. Yeah, I already said that you can really benefit from the mechanism. There is no magic involved. You can check pretty much every auto configuration that is going on. This is really easy to do. And my key feature for this thing is the service locator, which is really, really powerful. So you can use it yourself. Thanks for listening so far. You find a repository with the whole demo, the whole source code, the talks, and my speaker notes if you want. I've written a really useful starter for my company. We are still doing, and we keep on doing server-side rendered templates. We are Java shop and not JavaScript shop. I have no clue how to optimize JavaScript actually, and Row4j is a great tool to do this, and I've written a starter for this, and check it out if you're into it. And you certainly can reach me on Twitter or on my blog. Thank you very much. Feel free to ask any question.
I've got a question. You were renaming your beam from the name of the type to default.
Yeah.
Is that your recommendation, that a starter should not name its beams as the type?
I don't know if there's an official recommendation, but I certainly wouldn't use the type name, but give it a more speaking name to communicate my intention. There is a recommendation of how to name your starters. You should name your starters with a feature and then Spring Boot starter and not vice versa to differentiate from the official starters, though. Any other questions?
Do you really need that order annotations?
I didn't check this, but as I said, I'm the kind of guy who wants to be explicit in this. I've been doing this in my projects, yes. Yeah, you probably use yourself in a bunch of annotations. That is correct, certainly correct, yeah. Anyone else?
Oh. I think regarding component scanning, would you recommend turning component scanning off?
No, I'm actually not turning it completely off. I have a set of components that I always want in my application. I tend to name them all the same. It was a good question about naming stuff. I keep on naming my repositories, ending in repositories, and the same with controllers, so I can find them easily. Some years ago, I stopped organizing stuff in controllers, persistence, services, repositories. I put them into the packages with the business. And so I want component scanning at the level of my application so that I get my repositories. Okay. Okay. We have. Sorry, no more questions. If there are no more questions, then we can leave 5 minutes earlier. Sorry. Hope you enjoyed it.